Here we go. Hi, everyone. Okay. Oh, I have to fix something because for some reason Danielle's like lower. There we go. I'm like, I don't want you small in the corner. The program that I use is called Ecamm and allows us to do these different configurations, and it's too many for me. I'm like, just leave it at the side by side. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday night. Happy safe Wednesday night. I drove at 5 o'clock this morning in a torrential snowstorm to get to the airport, 15 miles an hour in Columbus, Ohio. Probably not my best move, actually, now that I think about it. Gone safely into New York, and I'm hearing from New York people and East Coast people, there's a lot of stuff going on. So for everyone there, I hope you're home, cozy, and ready to watch and learn from my guest today. So if this is your first time joining, just a little bit of housekeeping. You can ask questions at any point that you want. When I ask them of our guest will depend a little bit on when I feel that there's a little break in here. But if you want to say hi to us, please do. We always love to know where you're joining us from. And if you're watching this after the fact, I know a lot of you like to just grab the link and watch it at a time that's better for you. I love that, especially as healthcare providers. Like maybe we've been seeing patients all day and we're like, I don't want to learn tonight, but maybe I want to learn about this topic later. And you find us on YouTube at any point that you want. If you want to ask a question, I will either answer it if it's appropriate for me to answer, or I will grab Danielle so that she can answer it. Because the whole goal of the Better Nutrition Program is to bring practitioners and patients together to have better conversations so that we can get better outcomes. So that's a lot from me. You guys also know that you'll see me looking down. I'm not ignoring our guests or ignoring you. I just want to make sure that I'm answering questions and also sharing this on different pages. So, Danielle, that is a perfect way for me to turn it over to you and introduce you. I am so excited about this because when you popped up and said, hey, let's talk about keto, I was like, great. It's so awesome to have a dietitian who knows her stuff about keto. But when I learned and I went in, I was like, you have this amazing website, Migraine Relief Coach. And, I know so many people over the years who have dealt and battled migraines, and there hasn't really felt like there's one correct diet. And as I dove into your information, it's like there might not be, but what you have is these great tips coming together. Hi, Marina, over Migraine Strong. Awesome. Great to see you. And so what we want to do on this part is actually dive in and learn about, I think the best way for us to start, Danielle, with an introduction is, how did you become interested in talking about migraines and really going down the keto path? So let's start there.
Sure. Well, I had graduated and became an RD in the late 80s. And I, most of my time was in clinical nutrition. And then I left. I just left the field for a while. I went into medical sales because I just loved being part of healthcare. And a few years ago, I was diagnosed with chronic migraine. And it was extremely frustrating. I had migraine symptoms 24/7. It was really awful. And it was very hard to find good resources to help me to get better. The medicines weren't really helping that much, but I knew there's more to any chronic condition than just, taking medications. I wasn't against medications. I actually wanted one that really worked. But, I really found that it was very hard to find people that knew anything about managing chronic conditions, specifically migraine. And you hear so much about headaches and migraine attacks and diet. I knew there was something to it, and I knew that something was triggering me, but I couldn't figure it out. So I started having a lot of success. Well, first I have to say I made myself sicker. I tried to eat clean, to do all of these things that as an RD you would look to first to make your diet more healthy. But I actually ended up making myself sicker because I didn't realize that what I was doing was eating so many more common migraine triggers. So
I love that. I was reading in your notes and you said that actually like following the healthy diet was making me worse. And I think it's so nice for our patients to actually hear that we hear you. Like and that's not to say that every dietitian that you meet is going to have gone through specifically what you're going through, but I think part about working with an expert is somebody that understands that just because there's research or one way that says something is healthy, it may not be healthy for your body. So I loved that in your notes. Yeah.
Well, so yeah, I had made myself sicker and then I got better. So I figured, hey, there's something to this. There has to be more people that I can help. At the time, I had let my credentials lapse. So I had to study for the exam again. So I became an RD.
Sorry.
I know.
Right.
So I became an RD again and dedicated my practice to helping people with migraine find relief. And sometimes that relief is just 30% relief. Sometimes it's more like 75 or 80% because it's, migraine is a chronic condition and some people have it far worse than others.
So let's take a pause there. I think that's so important. Reed, hello, and thank you for always popping in. So one of our favorite nutrition folks from down in Florida. Let's talk about that for a second, Danielle. I think that's a really important place for us to take a pause because I think sometimes people hear the word migraine and they go, oh, that's that person that had that really bad headache and went and sat in the dark room. And I think we don't often understand or give credit to what it actually is, and especially also that it can be an extremely debilitating chronic condition. So can you sort of give from a professional standpoint what the difference might be from somebody who has a headache, which, oh, by the way, I'm not knocking headaches, but has a headache versus migraine, and in particular what we're talking about here?
Sure. Well, everybody experiences it very differently. And there are even people that have migraine that have a form called vestibular migraine, which doesn't even really have much head pain associated with it.
Okay.
But headache is one of the symptoms of migraine. But migraine can be sound distortion, visual field distortion, a sense of being off balance and dizzy. The pain can be, mild, moderate, or severe. When you look at some old definitions of it, they always say that it has to be like one-sided and throbbing. That's really not true. It can take various forms of pain itself. But you're right. For some people, they just have to go to a dark room and be quiet with maybe some ice on their head and just kind of ride it out. But it can be very debilitating. It occurs on a spectrum. Some people are kind of lucky and they only get it a couple of times a year, even though it might last for a couple of days. And some people, unfortunately, have an intractable migraine that just keeps going. They don't really get any relief from it.
Okay. That's great. That's super helpful. Okay, so back to, and if you're just joining us, Danielle Aberman, we have her information here, migraine relief coach. You guys know me. I go really quickly and we like to have fun here, but the great part is she has so many resources. Her team, oh my gosh, what they've put together on this website. So if you're not finding her right now, you're like, I can't even pay attention to the rest of this interview, go over to the site so we can direct you right there. But what I was asking her about is really something that she presented, which I find so fascinating, and that is that a well-done ketogenic diet, we're going to get into that, what that distinction is. A well-done ketogenic diet may actually help migraines. And Danielle, like myself, whenever I talk about digestive health, was actually patient number one. So let's dive into your story. So you were dealing with, you're in medical sales, had been a dietitian, then you're like, wait, this migraine stuff. So round two, I'm back to being a dietitian again and keto. So let's talk about how that came about.
Well, before I was doing keto, I went through a migraine-oriented elimination diet to try to find my triggers. Okay. And I had a lot of triggers. Just about everything that they say is a common migraine trigger, I had. So I was on a very restricted diet. I had done some food sensitivity testing, and it just kind of confirmed that I needed to be on a very restricted diet. And then, I kept on reading about the ketogenic diet and how it affects migraine. And my whole experience, or my whole thought about what the keto diet was kind of ew, gross. When I was in school, it was really just used mainly for intractable seizures from epilepsy, right, mainly in kids. And I think a lot of the reason why they only gave it to kids was because it was gross. Yeah. And a lot of times it was just something that you gave through a tube or in a bottle, and the baby was, that's just what the baby grew up, or that's how, that was food for the child. so I was really turned off by the whole concept. Plus, I was a total carb addict. I mean, I was schooled in low fat and eating healthy and fruits and vegetables and whole grains, and those are carbs. So the whole idea of shifting to a completely different way, I didn't think I was going to be able to get through the first 3 days. But my partner and one of my friend on Migraine Strong is somebody that also was interested in doing it for personal and professional reasons. So we did it together. We had a buddy. And that made all the difference because it is hard. But I knew I needed to try it. I was already in good control. And what happened is I stayed in very good control, and I realized that I had this brain fog that it had been with me for so long that I didn't realize that I had so much brain fog until it was gone.
Well, so that's really interesting. So let's pause there. So actually starting the keto, and let's talk about how you actually started it. Because one of the things we're going to get into is in an implementation, Danielle recommends actually 3 phases. So stick with us because we're going to talk about the 3 phases of keto. We're also going to talk about what you should avoid, especially from a migraine standpoint, and how you make sure you get in all those nutrients. So we're going to talk all about that. But when you start off in that place and we're talking about that keto space, it's like, how do you actually get started? You know, you said you were in good control. So tell me what that means and how would somebody get started?
Sure. Well, for me, what good control meant was that I wasn't having a lot of migraine attacks. I went from having 24/7 symptoms to a few a month, and then I was really down to probably 2 or 3 per month, which I was really happy with. So I was in control just by avoiding my food triggers and other things about, managing lifestyle. And then I decided that I was going to jump in with keto. So my first phase of keto was a little tricky because a lot of the keto mainstays are common migraine triggers, like, aged cheeses, cheddar cheese, blue cheese, avocado, nuts. These are foods that are, pretty popular with somebody that's just starting the ketogenic diet.
Avocado, I feel like some people these days are on, forget about keto, I feel like they're on an avocado diet. It's like, that's just it. Yeah.
Yeah, I buy them by the bag now.
Yeah.
And it used to be a trigger for me, but it's no longer a trigger.
So that's interesting. So one of the things that I think is really interesting in this conversation is there's a starting point. You were talking about 3 phases, but also the notion that in all of this, and I think this is at the core of better nutrition, is that when we figure out what your body needs right now, it's not necessarily going to be what your body needs into the future. So, and said differently, what's irritating or frustrating to your body right now may not be irritating or frustrating. And you used an expression, I'm looking down at my notes, because I want to make sure that I capture it right. It was about your neurons. I just want to make sure that I'm having one of those days where I'm just not going to see anything on the page. But you were saying how you need to protect your neurons. And I thought that was such an important piece. So explain a little bit about how, those very cranky neurons. That's what you said. Yeah. So for migraines, I love the way she describes migraines with these very cranky neurons. To the geeky dietitian inside of me, it was the best. So talk a little bit about what it is about keto, that may help these very cranky neurons.
Well, as with everything in migraine neurology, they don't really know exactly why. They just know it works for a big portion of people who try it. So one theory is that the ketones affect the neurotransmitter balance in your brain. So that one of the theories is that it works on the excess or potential excess of glutamate that's in the brain. So maybe it helps metabolize that. Okay. Maybe it just blunts the effect. But there seems to be some neurochemistry that the ketones are in there trying to soothe. The other issue is that it's also possible that with all of the things that the person has shifted in their diet, they've possibly shifted away from things that have been triggering for them or inflaming for them. So, if it's some group of carby foods, those foods are no longer being eaten.
Right.
So it could be just the elimination of certain categories of food or just very specific foods. And the other theory is that people with migraine have mitochondrial dysfunction. So the little powerhouses in our cells are seem to like burning fat and are very adept at burning fat and may not be able to metabolize glucose as they should. So that perhaps by giving a lot more ketone bodies and fatty acids, the mitochondria is better able to function.
I love that. So for anyone who was like, whoosh, that went over the head, what we're getting at is we really don't know specifically why, but there are a number of different pathways that those of us that love to explore that may think about. I was going to add one. I was going to say, I think the notion of reducing the amount of glycation that's occurring, the sugar and the protein connecting and sort of that distortion that can happen at the cellular level. I won't even get into that part, but I think there are so many pieces of that. So I keep taking you away from, I'm sure, what is the magic of many of the people listening. So you said that one of the things about keto that can be hard with starting is, wow, there are all of these foods that I'm thinking are migraine triggers, whether it's something as seemingly delicious and benign as avocado to nuts to, we've heard that one of the things about keto that actually works well for people are these grass-fed cheeses, the grass-fed milk, the dairy, the cheeses. But wow, what if those are migraine triggers? So when you started off avoiding those. And so what did you have when you started off? What was your keto?
It was pretty limited.
Okay.
It was pretty limited. I remember having a lot of, conversations about, wow, boy, I'm eating the same thing again. I know what I'm having tomorrow. I know what lunch is going to look like.
That's right.
I had a lot of cream cheese.
Okay.
I had a lot of heavy cream. I had salads and, of course, different meats. But aside from meats, I had, I would say, a lot of full-fat dairy, salads, broccoli, asparagus. I kind of had the same.
Did you have fish? Did you have wild salmon or?
I'm not a big fan of personal things.
Personal, right?
I love it. Of my partner, Eileen, who works with me at Migraine Strong, she eats salmon all the time because it's a fatty fish and she loves it. But you can certainly have plenty of fish.
So that's one of those key things. Remember, guys, there are things that might be triggers, but there also might be things that you just don't like. So, one of the things that your dietitian or practitioner has to be adept at doing is I'm not going to turn around and give Eileen all these great recipes for cream cheese and wild salmon. She's going to be like, no, thank you on that part. So you were doing that. And when you were having those things, so first of all, with your salad greens, your broccoli, your asparagus, were you measuring out the amount, or were you able to be sort of intuitively understand how much would be appropriate from a ketosis standpoint? How did you figure that piece out?
Well, I didn't consult an expert. I just learned from YouTube videos. Okay. And one of the leaders in the field is Dr. Eric Westman out of Duke. And
about to play North Carolina right now. Yep.
He's fantastic. And I watched his videos and did keto his way. And he says that you must have 2 cups of greens, no more, no less, and a cup of low-carb veggies like asparagus or broccoli, or cauliflower. So I did measure that because I didn't want to go over, and I also wanted to make sure that I was having that minimum. But I did measure other things.
And you actually said that. I thought that was really interesting, too, is that if you don't sustain ketosis, you won't get the benefits. And so I think to your point, especially in the beginning, you really have to be very focused on getting yourself in there. So do you do things like urine sticks, or how were you testing to see if you were in ketosis?
I did. I found it very motivating for me.
Okay.
In the beginning, I was testing all the time because once I got that first little trace ketones, I was so excited and I couldn't wait to continue to make the strips darker and darker, because that's how it works if you've never done it before. The little square is beige, and the darker it gets, the more ketones is measuring in your urine. So I did test, and I just ate pretty repetitively for a few days, knowing that if I could get over day 3, if I felt like I was in ketosis by the end of 3 days, then maybe I could try adding some things that I had suspicions about being triggers for me. So then I started adding like macadamia nuts and some bacon. So it started getting a lot more varied for me. So,
and, some people will say in that part, too, when they're, thinking about it, like, they're like, oh my gosh, the monotony of it. But I also, one of the things that I thought was so interesting in your pre-interview, in case I keep referring to notes, you guys, so I ask everyone to do pre-interview so I can figure out how we want to talk. But I thought one of the things that was really interesting is the notion of, if you're somebody who suffers from migraines, and let me back up. I think all of us have way too many decisions to make in a day, so I'm very conscious of, not layering things on that can create decision fatigue. But one of the things that you were saying is that actually that consistency of knowing what you were going to have for a period of time may actually make things easier. So did you feel that way? Did boredom win out, or did the ease win out? Or was it the competitive nature of getting the darker strip that won out?
Well, it was the competitive nature. And it was the competitive nature. I wanted to keep getting the strips darker. But I was getting bored. And I knew that I needed, just to have a well-formulated ketogenic diet, you have to have more variety. So I was very focused on getting into ketosis and staying in ketosis, because I had heard that being in ketosis kind of gave you a bit of a force field.
Yeah.
So once you had that force field up, you started feeling better, brain fog lifted, you had a boost of energy, and you were able to eat some food triggers. And I absolutely loved that, because I started being able to have things like avocados. Almonds had been a trigger of mine, so I was able to have almonds again. It was just really nice to be able to enjoy more foods with my family. And I found that going out was a breeze. I could order a salad and not worry about, if they had, if there were little pieces of onion in my salad. It just gave me such a sense of freedom. I loved it.
So let's talk about, so how long ago was this that you did your first experiment with keto and migraines?
Probably 3.5 years ago.
Okay. And so in that time period, what has been your experience as it relates to both staying on keto and also your migraine experience?
Well, I committed for 3 months, and I stayed on it for 10. So I really liked it. And the reason that I had stepped off of it is because I really did miss root vegetables. I just kept thinking about beets, of all things.
There's always going to be the one thing, right? That it's like, for me it would be chocolate, but like we don't even need to go there. But yeah.
Well, there's good keto chocolate.
Right. Okay. So we are going to go there. Let me be clear. Yeah. And I just want to acknowledge Jennifer. That's the sweetest message. Jennifer said you're so knowledgeable. She's so grateful that we're doing this interview. And Jennifer, I couldn't agree more. So I'm really grateful on that part too. So just wanted to give her a shout out. Okay. So how long? So let's talk in that time period. Yeah. So root vegetables. The love affair with root vegetables broke your ketosis. Yes. And I also knew from experience that some people didn't really need to go as far as being in ketosis.
Some people definitely need to be in full ketosis to get the relief for their migraines. But some people still experience relief if they're just, they basically are whole foods. So there's no, junky foods, lots of additives. So it's whole foods, no sugar, no grains, and limited starchy vegetables. So maybe they'll have this little sweet potato here or there, but it's low carb, but short of being low carb enough to be in ketosis. And I was wondering, am I lucky enough to be able to still have the relief without being in full ketosis? And the answer, fortunately for me and for a lot of people, is yes.
And has there been anything else that is like maybe a life trigger where, do you notice if you're either and you don't have to get personal on this part, but like with your patients, if it's been, oh, hey, like around the time of my cycle, that makes a difference. Or if I haven't gotten sleep and I'm more stressed, or if I've had a cold, that it's important to go back to ketosis or being more strict? Or do you find that it really is once you've been through that, you don't have to, you're sort of have that force field going?
I don't think I've ever looked at it like that. I don't know. It would be interesting to look at that. I do know that in general, for women that are still menstruating, that their symptoms tend to kick up with hormonal changes. So if I had somebody like that, I might say, well, maybe just the week before you're going to get your period, maybe those are the days that you just try to keep it to 20 to 30 grams.
Okay.
And then the other times of the week, have your beets and sweet potatoes.
So let's go through the 20 to 30 grams. Is there a difference either the time of day or if you have the 20 to 30 grams at one time versus if you space it out in the day in terms of your experience?
I don't think it really matters for migraine unless you're somebody that that has is very insulin resistant. So, and there's a significant number of people who have migraine, who have type 2 diabetes, and have significant insulin resistance. So for them, I would want them to have more of a steady, instead of having, just one bump of 20 grams of carbohydrate in one meal, I would probably suggest that they break it up into, 10 and 10 or, whatever makes sense throughout the day for them.
So I want to talk about probably my 3 favorite food groups. Actually, not fair because one of my favorite foods in general is broccoli, but I am going to jokingly talk about 3 favorites. So the ones I would get asked about are coffee, alcohol, and chocolate. So let's look at those 3. Are they completely off the plan? Many immediately we could say, oh, migraine triggers. So tell me a little bit about how it relates based on your experience.
If we're not talking about just keto, I would say all 3 of those are significant issues for people that have migraine. Coffee and caffeine in general is something that can cause rebound issues, meaning that, if you have it a lot, then if you're sensitive to it, and then it kind of can just exacerbate the whole symptoms. And then people will say, well, then I stopped and it got worse. Well, that was because they went through caffeine withdrawal.
Yeah.
So what we teach at Migraine Strong is that you should try to get off of caffeine.
Okay.
And then just see, after caffeine is clear from your system for a number of weeks or months, then try adding it back, but add it back to see if you can use it kind of as a migraine treatment. Because caffeine does have the ability to abort a migraine. I don't know. You're nodding your head. I'm wondering.
Yeah, that's been my go-to. Like I literally saw someone the other day who was having the start of a migraine. I was like, you need a shot of espresso. I was like that. I've heard espresso and a B vitamin. Like boom. So it sounds very weird, but So. Okay, so I think that's great. So in terms of stopping, have you had any experience with, I was just talking to somebody else about adaptogen herbs and using them in place of, so things like reishi or cordyceps for a stimulant benefit for people who are looking at the caffeine to give them that stimulant benefit. Is that anything that you guys have looked at as it relates to migraines?
I haven't looked into that category specifically. There are a couple of herbs that are helpful for migraine. One is feverfew, but I'm not sure what category of herb that is. It's not my area.
Yeah.
Some people also find that boswellia or ashwagandha are good.
Yes.
I don't particularly use them, so it definitely is not my area.
Yeah.
Other than the feverfew, because also feverfew has some research behind it, and the others might too.
Yeah.
But I know that feverfew does, and we recommend that quite often.
Great. So let's talk about the other one. The question that I get asked is like, so if I'm doing keto for migraines, like, do I drink, the answer that I get for people is they want to have alcohol, Tito's, like that. I mean, literally, it's like the, gluten-free vodka, but what's the space? I mean, I always tell people if you're really working on healing the body, it's not the time for alcohol. Like there's no healing component to alcohol other than maybe some emotional healing on that piece. But what's been your experience with patients and sort of looking at the alcohol side of things?
Well, from a keto standpoint, alcohol can interfere for some people, alcohol can interfere with getting into ketosis.
Okay.
So until somebody is like keto adapted and way, into keto, I usually suggest that they not have any.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there are types of alcohol that are lower in carb than others. Wine is going to be higher. Beer is going to be higher. Beer will probably kick you out of ketosis if you're
looking at it. Just by looking at it. Totally.
Right.
Totally.
But some people can certainly stay in ketosis with a little bit of wine. But alcohol spirits tend to be pretty well accepted, or not bump people out of ketosis because of the limited carbs. And of course you have to consider mixers, but that's common sense.
Right. And I think our only caveat to that would also be when you're not having a lot of carbs, you can get drunk pretty quickly. So I think that's another factor to consider, your behavior and also just what a hangover feels like. You're trying to, do the other. So the third food group, chocolate. You said to me there's some good keto chocolates, which I think is let's use chocolate as an entree point into keto is so popular today now that there's a lot of keto products, and kind of like when gluten-free first came out, I remember seeing gluten-free on the label of a water and I was like, oh, this is crazy. So let's use chocolate and you said good keto chocolates. Let's use it as an entree to talk about chocolate, of course, but then let's move into the space of what's the nonsense when it comes to keto products.
Well, the chocolate that I think of as keto chocolate, and there might be others, Lily's, and I wish I had my prop because
Me too. I wish I had it right here. That's right. Yes.
But Lily's it's sweetened with stevia, and I like to have a couple of bites of that every day. I might have a little bite at lunch, and I might have a bigger bite at right after dinner time. But I find that particularly yummy. Some of the other ones are not made with stevia. They're made with some sugar alcohols that for some people are just not tolerated well GI-wise.
And you guys, I do have a recipe on my site for making, like, before there was Lily's, which why wouldn't you go grab it? But I think what we're really talking about here is, I remember way back, and this was like, probably like, 15 years ago. But cacao, glycerin you could use, or the stevia, and it was you just need a drop of glycerin. So you weren't, and then a coconut oil, and you can actually make your own, very easily on that part. But now that there's the stevia droppers that even some of them have some flavor to it. So I made peppermint chocolate that way. And so I think that can be really fun, to play with. Okay. So in the world of keto products now we're seeing things that are, being sold every way to Sunday. What would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that you see in the keto space as it applies to migraine? And it's okay to generalize also, just in terms of, with the popularity of keto, what are some of the problems or things to watch out for?
I think that what to watch out for is what we call carb creep. When you start out with keto and you're just doing whole foods and you're not doing a lot of the keto products and a lot of the keto baking, your carbs tend to be lower. And then a lot of times people can tolerate a lot more. Like in the beginning, you might have to be 25 grams of carbs per day. But after a few months, you might be able to stay in ketosis with 50. And there's a huge difference between having 25 grams per day and 50 grams per day. But I think sometimes it starts mentally triggering a desire for more of that. And sometimes you start getting into some junkier types of foods. But if that helps somebody to make this a sustainable way of eating, and it's managing their migraine or managing some other health condition, fantastic. A very good friend of mine, Marina, she gave me a keto ice cream book, and I made peanut butter keto ice cream the other night, and it was fantastic. So, what
do you do if you're dairy free? Because I've had a lot of people say to me, like, just no dairy from a keto standpoint, but they might be, so I might be answering the question, they might be okay with the nuts and the avocado side of it, or what would you recommend if somebody's choosing to be or needs to be dairy free?
It is a bigger challenge. It's definitely a bigger challenge to be dairy free, but it happens all the time, and people will just typically make more use of nuts and nut butters, maybe nut milks. There are also some, Kite Hill is a brand that makes a lot of dairy-like products. That, like, they make it's a yogurt that it has the tang of yogurt. So it's a pretty good yogurt substitute, but it's not dairy. I think it's made out of mainly nuts.
Yeah, and everyone knows I always disclose, but I'm an advisor for Califia Farms, and they also make products. In fact, somebody just asked us recently, they've been doing a ketogenic diet. This is actually a good question for you. And they were trying oat milk, and they said that they felt fine with it. The oat milk they're serving was 8 grams of, and it was, they were asking if it could be because you're not actually getting the oats. Like, I assume when they said they felt fine, let's say that what they meant was they were still in ketosis. But would you say an oat milk could be an option, or is it just no grain? So why would you go oat and not do, almond or macadamia or one of the other ones?
Well, I don't know. Maybe they were just looking for a slightly different flavor or a different texture, because sometimes the flavors can be a little, or the look. Sometimes it's like, oh, this gray.
Yeah, what's this? Yeah, right.
So maybe they just prefer that. But since it's a grain, that wouldn't be my go-to.
Yeah.
But if somebody can stay in ketosis with that, I think that's fine. I mean, you can't have all these hard and fast rules for people that are doing this to manage a chronic condition, and it's working for them. Yeah.
And I think that's so important. So actually, bringing up Califia is a great way for me to segue into a conversation, which is, one of the concerns that's often it's on the listserv. It blows up all the time with dietitians. People are very pro or con keto instead of being like, let's see what's right for the patient. But one of the major concerns is like, oh my gosh, we're not going to get any of the things that we need to support the microbiome, right? So one of the reasons I actually brought up the Califia one was the unsweetened almond yogurt has a really high dose of bifidobacteria. So one of the, it's important for us to get our probiotics. It's important for us to get our magnesium, which we were just talking about chocolate. So no problem there. We're good on that part. There are plenty of plants that you can consume and your dairy to get calcium. So I think we're doing great on that part. Your animals could give you, all sorts of different essential fatty acids or hemp seeds if you're vegan. What would you say, because people like to brand diets as problematic for nutrients you need to be concerned about. I think the only one that I hear consistently concern about is where are you going to get your fiber from, or enough fiber. But how do you sort of create a balance so that the body is still getting what it needs from a keto diet?
Well, I think when it's a well-formulated ketogenic diet, it does have a lot of veggies in it. Now, in the beginning, when you're trying to establish ketosis, you're going to be at, that around that 20 grams. But then when you're keto adapted and you're a fat burning machine instead of a carb burning machine, you can usually tolerate a significant amount more. So, I mean, I don't think I'd be able to. Well, actually, I probably would have been able to have like a bean-based meal and stay in ketosis, but probably not, ongoingly.
Right.
But I think that you can get a lot of variety in there. And believe me, I'm a fan of having a good amount of plant material and fiber in the diet. But I also wonder if the recommendations for that high amount of fiber are because of how many carbs we typically eat. Like if you take out these simple sugars in our diet, do you really need all of that plant fiber?
Right.
Keto is very nutrient dense. I think the most nutrient dense food that's out there are, organ meats. So meats tend to be very nutritious. They're a lot more nutritious than an apple, and I love apples, so it's nothing bad about apples or celery or, foods that have a lot of fiber. But I don't know that if you're having a basically grain-free, sugar-free diet, I don't know that you need a lot of extra fiber.
And would you do the poop test? I mean, I always tell people, like, if the bowels are moving, so first of all, as we talked about, and I joke about chocolate, but if you're not getting enough magnesium, you cannot, your muscles will not relax. You can't be giving your brain what it needs to relax, or your head what it needs to relax from a migraine, et cetera. So that could be something you supplement, or it could be something you're getting in from the chocolate, as we talked about. But do you think a good old poop test? I mean, if you're not pooping, then we have to start exploring. Is it, magnesium, water, fiber? It could be, are you just not moving, I guess, would be, like, physically, are you not moving? Could be another factor.
Well, I mean, I really don't have people that are complaining about it that much. I mean, if they're having, hard stools, or if it's difficult to pass, then I would consider that a problem. But with a ketogenic diet, you probably need to move your bowels less because there's just less matter moving through. But I don't know that it really needs to be addressed unless it's a strain.
Unless you start to experience that part.
And then I would just say add some magnesium. And typically people that have migraine already know that they should be increasing their magnesium supplements.
Yeah.
If you're taking magnesium glycinate and you're having trouble with constipation, then take some magnesium citrate.
Right. Yeah, that's super smart. And so, and sort of in conclusion on that part, I could talk to you for like hours. So we're going to have to have a whole other keto conversation. So I think in conclusion, again, this is why people, like, I'm sort of, to all the naysayers, or, it's kind of like, how does a vegan sit and defend where they get protein, and, all of these silly questions that get posed because somebody doesn't like to feel like they're being judged, right? So I think one of the ones that comes up is people will say, well, how do you know, like, if you're not eating these things, you're not getting what you need to prevent cancer, or you're not getting what you need to, how do you know, like, from a chronic disease, like, are we at a greater risk? So how do you help your patients sort of defend against, like, you would hope that the defense would be like, hey, I'm not suffering from migraines, like, let it go. But if they oftentimes they have to defend what they're doing to their doctor, or have that conversation. What's some of the advice that you've given for sort of how to have those conversations in defense of their keto for migraines?
Well, I do think that it's better to eat the rainbow. I do. I believe that it is better to do that.
My favorite.
But I also have to look at that in balance with the degree of enjoyment that the person can have. So what's the sense of having sweet potatoes and beets if half of your month you have to stay in a dark room.
Right.
So I think that's part of it. I think and also I think we started in the beginning talking about how diets sometimes can evolve, and sometimes what's needed, what your body needs at that point, changes. So I found that I was able to do keto and then step down and just do low carb. So I would encourage people that are embarking upon a ketogenic diet to give it a try and see what kind of relief that they can get, with the idea that eventually they can add some more foods back. But it is a challenge because our society is always telling you, plant-based, you have to be plant-based. I'm like, if plant-based works for you, fantastic.
Yeah.
But there's a huge group of people where plant-based just isn't going to work for them.
Yeah. And we're all in the same camp. Like, you do need the plants, and so it's a question of getting in. And I love what you said earlier, which is there might be a time period where some of this stuff is really limited, but we've all, like, you're fine in a limited capacity. You're not asking somebody to, suffice on 5 grams of fiber, or that kind of a thing for their life. It's really a time period on that part. So, I love this conversation. Danielle, thank you so much. You guys, this is just, you have so much knowledge. If you are feeling overwhelmed at all, just exhale. Take away one thing that you learned here tonight and say, hey, maybe I want to give that a shot. But maybe you're like, I feel like I'm almost there, but I'm just not sure. That's why I want to send you over to Danielle's website at migrainereliefcoach.com. She's got yes.
It's actually, I'm going to make sure that I point that to our newer website. It's migrainestrong.com.
You know what's so funny is I heard you saying that a few times. That's going to be so easy. I'm not sure if I can edit it in here, but I will be able to edit it in the notes. And please do the URL switch over. So,
yes,
you guys, Migraine Strong. Oh my gosh, I love it. How awesome.
Well, for Migraine Strong, there are 5 of us that are contributing.
Great.
So there's people that have vestibular migraine, which can be a totally different animal.
Beast. Yeah.
So, and like I said, there are 5 of us contributing. So it's not just my view; it's 4 other people,
Brilliant.
and we're all passionate about helping people get better.
Yeah, so, I went through and I read everybody's bios. I just love it. So thank you for bringing this area of expertise. I think to so many people, I'm thrilled to share it because if you are suffering, and especially in this migraine situation, as we talked about, I think that, to feel like there is an opportunity to actually heal yourself with food, and not feel like you just have to look at food and avoid food and feel like you're trying to do the right thing and not getting better. So I think, Danielle, your story is so poignant there. So I really, really appreciate you sharing both your professional knowledge and your personal experience. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I could talk about it forever.
Good. Well, that is going to happen. So I love that part. All right, my dear. Everybody, remember to share this interview. And if you're watching on YouTube, if you can give us a thumbs up, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks. Bye.
Goodbye.